Hi, Russell Sturgis here again with a new blog, and once again I'm down at Double Bay, not far from my home, and it's a beautiful Monday afternoon. A little bit of a breeze happening today, but just exquisite here once again. So welcome back, and last week we talked about how to maintain stillness and had a lot of really lovely responses from people about that particular blog, and they found it informative, and a lot of people were asking for more information on how to practically maintain peace and stillness in day-to-day life. And so today I thought I would do a blog that initially started out as a blog on financial stress, but it became very evident that the principles that were associated with managing any sort of external stressor, whether it be a person or a situation or circumstance, really required the same set of strategies ultimately in one form or another to be able to manage it. So as much as I begin talking in the blog about financial stress, I go on to talk about how to manage stressors that take us out of our peace in day-to-day life. And so I want to begin by sharing, and this is in the blog, and please don't turn this video off because I'm about to share a biblical story, but I think it's a really powerful metaphorical story about how to deal with stress in general. So some of you be familiar with the one where Jesus is in the Sea of Galilee, out on the Sea of Galilee in a ship, and he's traveling with some of his disciples. And he's had a busy day, and we can assume that it's probably evening and maybe even night time. And he is asleep at the back of the boat, and it says that he had his head on a pillow. And this storm comes up. And all of a sudden, the boat is tempest-tossed in this storm on the sea. And it's so much so that the people who are traveling with Jesus at this time become very, very concerned for their life and his life, and it doesn't matter how rough the ocean's getting. The fact is he's still sleeping, and eventually they can't. They're in fear of their life so much that they wake him up because they know that he has the capacity to make a difference here. And they say to him, "Master, we're in danger of perishing. This is so bad we could die." And he sort of takes a moment, he stands up and he takes into account what's going on. And he realizes that they're incredibly fearful, that there is a tempest that's blowing. Now, he's been in a very peaceful place. He's been sleeping, so it's not worrying him, and he wakes up. And he says three words, and these three words, I believe, are the key to understanding how to overcome all stress. So he stands up and he says, "Peace, be still." And in that moment, the oceans calmed and everything became peaceful and still. Now he goes on to say something else, and he says, "How come you don't have any faith?" And I assume that he goes back to sleep. But this time the ocean's calm and they're calm. I'm pretty sure that most of us experienced those times when we've been asleep or we've woken up in the middle of the night, we're in bed and we're tossing and turning and we're in our own tempest, which is in our mind and in our consciousness, and we're being we're in fear of the outcome. And I'm sure that there's a point for every one of us where we wish we could go, "Master, the tempest is raging, that we're in peril of perishing. Help us." And I'm sure we've all done that. I'm sure we've all had a prayer at different times, or we've appealed to a higher source of consciousness that said, "Fix this up for me." And in this particular metaphor, and once again, as much as I don't wish to offend anybody about using a biblical story as a metaphor, I also don't wish to offend anyone who's a devoted Christian when I talk about this story being metaphorical. What we have is this state of mind, which is the wind that causes the tempest. It's long been known that the element of air is associated with the mind. And of course, the impact of that is what happens within our consciousness at the emotional level, which is represented by the sea, and the fact that the sea and water represents this emotional element. And so there's this emotional turmoil. And of course, boats have long been associated with the vessel that carries us through the journey of life. So it's like, which is really symbolic of the body, and the fact that here we have this physical structure, which is the body, being disturbed by the tempest of a mental condition, which is creating an emotional reaction. It's a beautiful metaphorical story. And so Jesus understands the metaphor in this, in telling this story, or the gospel writer who's telling this story. And his formula is threefold: peace, be still. So in other words, he's saying that if you're wanting to establish a place of stillness, then this is about creating a new model or state of consciousness, which is a peace consciousness. Now, if we were to use modern vernacular for this, this is like somebody saying, maybe a psychotherapist, a psychologist, or somebody who's working with somebody who's in a disturbed state of consciousness, saying, in order for you to create a new neural reality in terms of what it is that you wish your brain to sort of work towards and align with in terms of what you desire most, you need to create a new neural pathway. So instead of it being about how you've been programmed to behave, I'm going to ask you to choose a new set of behaviours which are peace-based, which has peace as the priority, and that these new choices that you're going to make that are peace-centred are going to result in you coming into a place of stillness. Now, what we have is generally this notion that in order to resolve the problem of, for example, financial stress, not having enough money, what we do is we go through this whole idea that we've got to come up with a way of being able to find extra money, or sell off things to get the money we want, or to change our circumstances, or we go through trying to manipulate the external in order to change our reality. Now, in a material world, that kind of makes sense, but in the metaphorical world, it's a little bit like saying, I have a movie that I'm projecting and I don't like the movie, so what I'm going to do is change the screen. And by changing the screen, I'll be able to change what it is that I'm looking at. When in fact, this particular concept really is suggesting that if you don't like what you're seeing on the screen, you actually have to change the movie. And that's really what Jesus was saying in this parable. He was saying, you've got to adopt a consciousness of peace. So what I want to talk to you about is that in order to create a new neural program based on peace, you need some strategies to be able to do that. And these are things that you'd be aware of in terms of what you could do. Now, in the blog, I talk about one of the really simple ones that I was taught 20 years ago, and that was to place reminders in your life to choose peace in stressful situations. So these were sort of like little prompts in order to reprogram what it was that you're going to focus your thinking on. And for me, it was about finding stickers. I found heart stickers that were gold in colour, and I put these heart stickers everywhere in my life. I had them on in my office, I had them on the phone, I had them in the car, had them in the shed, I had them on my golf clubs. I had them anywhere where I had the opportunity of being reminded that I could choose peace instead of what it was that I was experiencing in my stressful state. I had a comical situation where I recently shared this strategy with one of my clients who had one sitting right in the centre of the steering wheel in her car, and she got pulled over by the police for a breathalyser one day. And as she's completed the breathalyzing test, the policeman said, "Madam, very well done." He said, "I noticed you have one gold star." He said, "You can give yourself another one. Job well done." And I thought that was a really lovely take on this little strategy that I put in place in order to maintain peace as my priority. The other things that that you can do in this is seek for a peaceful solution. Now, peace is the natural consequence of staying in awareness, and an awareness that is manifesting as compassion and empathy. So this is about being able to develop an awareness where you begin to see what's really going on around you without your movie being projected, without your story. Now, normally when we become aware of what's going on around us with our story, we act from a sympathetic place and we relate to other people's pain through our own pain, and in fact create a strategy for trying to help resolve our own pain, as opposed to being truly present to the person that's there. So in this particular strategy, it's the idea that we have this capacity to be aware, and we can step into the shoes of this other person's pain and understand their pain without it having to be about us then going into our pain. And in this place of being aware, we then, and being empathetic, we act compassionately. So last week we talked about this whole idea. Part of that would be saying, if this person's in an attacking state, then they're calling for help. And so from a compassionate place, I'm going to extend love in my awareness of who this other person is. Now, I may not understand all of the variables that sits behind their behaviour. Course in Miracles has a wonderful statement where it says, we're never upset for the reason we think we are. So it's alluding to this whole idea that when we get upset and angry at somebody, it's actually been triggered by something else, and I'm going to suggest to you that it's actually been triggered by our fear, which is ultimately is our story, and that it could be easily determined that in fact the upset is a historical upset. It's something that's existed from generally our childhood. It could be later than that, but in fact has nothing to do with now. All that's happened now has reminded you of your pain and has brought you to this place in acting out in this way. So one of the things that becomes first and foremost, if you choose peace as your priority, then awareness, compassion and empathy are going to become states of awareness and consciousness that you're going to try to apply when it relates to the people that you're encountering. One of the ways that we're able to do this is purely stay the observer. Now, and this is where the first one of those words that I said, which was awareness, really gets to kick in. And that is, instead of choosing to give something a meaning, when we observe something happening, instead of judging, which is one of the forms of giving something a meaning, we can purely observe the facts without giving a meaning. And the empathy that then is evoked is when we ask the question, how does that serve them for them to behave in that way? And of course, what happens is, in true empathy, you say, how does it serve me to relate to them in the way that I am relating to them now, particularly if it's reactive. So what means is that we have this ability to move into this place of being empathetic in seeking to understand. So we replace judgment and giving something a meaning with seeking to understand what's going on, and instead of trying to give it a meaning, we seek to understand how it serves them and how it serves me. So understanding is something that really is evidence of empathy. We're not trying to fix anything. We're not trying to manipulate and control a situation. It's really seeking to understand, because many times that requires authentic questions. That requires the ability to be the observer, understand whose business is whose in this. So in other words, if they're upset, it's not your business, it's their business. If they're upset at you, it's still their business, it's not your business. You have to understand that the only reason that they're in attack mode, the only reason they're upset at you, is because of expectations that they've held, or things that help trigger them of the memories of their own deep pain. The other thing that can happen here is begin to trust in and have faith in the power for staying in stillness to change or create a parallel reality. So this is when Jesus stood up and he says, "Peace be still," and there was a instant shift in the reality, and a parallel reality of stillness emerged, and he asked the question, why didn't you guys have faith to do this? And so it's this whole notion that when we have the capacity to trust peace by choosing these actions that I've made reference to, that a parallel reality emerges. And invariably when we're dealing with stressful situations, two things become really evident. First of all, you get to reprogram your response to stressful situations, which is awareness and peace instead of worry and stress. So you create a new neural pathway which you, if repeat sufficiently, are able to completely overrule and shut off the old patterns of behaviour. And by the way, the worry patterns you learnt from your parents generally, or you learnt from whoever it was that was programming your behaviour in terms of how to respond to those stressors. So what I'm saying here is that you can adopt a parallel reality, and in that parallel reality of stillness, you can do two things. One is be attentive to intuition. In other words, all of a sudden, there's this intuitive sense that you can align with that can be give you a strategy for problem solving. In my own experience, there's something else that can happen, and that's referred to as the still small voice. That's divine intervention, that's divine flow. This is the capacity for miracles to happen, to be able to trust in and see and begin to acknowledge that miracles can change the reality, and all of a sudden things can happen that otherwise would never have happened. But they come as a direct result that you've been able to make a shift in your consciousness. Look, I've given you a few ideas today that hopefully will be helpful. I think we could pursue this a little bit further. I want to reiterate these in probably another blog next week. The written blog that goes with this is a little bit longer than normal because these are really important principles. And I'd like you to play with these as notions, and please, if you have questions about these things and you'd like to explore them, chances are somebody else would like to explore these more, and they would benefit from your questions. Your comments are always appreciated. Questions, once again, would always be invited. If you want to know more about this work and how the Enhances Awareness program, which is the work that my life is dedicated to these days, could make a difference around living a sustainably peaceful life, then please go to our website, eapmentor.com, go to the Facebook page, which is /eapmentor.com, or you could go to type in Enhances Awareness Program on Facebook and you'll find us there. Thank you for following our videos and blogs, and hey, another one will be out in a couple of weeks' time. Hope you enjoy it. Once again, any questions, please contact us. Bye.